I'm Hank Stoltz, and it is time now for the Weekly Business Report. The Weekly Business Report, a co-production of Worcester Business Journal and Radio Worcester, and the podcast is heard each and every Monday at WBJournal.com. You're also able to hear it on the Radio Worcester Network on Tuesdays at 9 a.m. And let me hand it over now to Grant Welker from the Worcester Business Journal to introduce today's guest and set up a little bit about what it is that we are going to be talking about with the president of QCC.
Thanks a lot, Hank. We're here talking with Quinsigamond Community College President Luis Pedraja. As the coronavirus pandemic spread and starting in March, QCC was one of virtually every college in central Massachusetts and beyond that had to quickly shut down and move a lot of their operations online, switch to remote learning for the rest of the semester. Since then, QCC and others have been spending a lot of this time trying to figure out where to go next. Out of an abundance of safety, QCC has decided to keep its classes virtually entirely online with some exceptions, including for some laboratory work for this fall. It has taken a more precautionary measure than a lot of other campuses that have so far announced that they would be largely online, in some cases looking to wrap up the fall semester early in person and then switching to online learning through the remainder of the semester. So today we talk with President Luis Pedraja of QCC, who has been on the forefront of a number of social issues lately, to talk about that decision with remote learning. So President Pedraja, could you first take us back to March and why you ultimately decided then to shut down your campus and what the factors you were looking at then were?
Well, we were looking at a rapidly spreading virus, and back in January when we first heard that it was coming, we started putting in place a continuity of instructions and operation plan with the thought that we might have to temporarily shut down some classes. We didn't anticipate the whole college shutting down, but we knew that it was a possibility, and we wanted to make sure that that was the case. As we got into mid-March and numbers were starting to spike, and we started seeing some other institutions close, we had spring break coming up, which gave us a natural break, and it was good timing for us to shut down, delay the start of the spring semester, of the continuation of classes, and coming back from spring break by a week, to give us some time to help our faculty transition the courses that were already underway into remote format. We already had some courses that were online from the very beginning, about 25% of our courses, and a lot of our faculty were trained online, so it made it easier. They did a remarkable job in transitioning, and at the same time we put in place a lot of support services for students. But the decision was done out of the safety for students, staff, faculty, and of our community. We knew that it was going to come, and soon enough, after we had shut down temporarily and decided to move to remote, we got the requests from the executive offices to minimize our presence on campus, and we did that fairly quickly, and for the most part seamlessly.
And Dr. Pedraja, now, of course, students are not going to be going back in the fall. You took decisive action, and you took it fairly quickly as well. Was there ever the temptation to say, let's just wait another week, and let's see how things are going before making that decision for this fall?
There's always a temptation to wait on a decision, but the problem is that our students needed to be prepared. We needed to let them know what to expect. I feel that putting it off just delays students making preparations and informed choices. We also have to prepare our faculty, prepare our staff, prepare our support system. We had spent weeks meeting with my crisis team and looking at the COVID response, meeting with health experts, and looking at trends. All the predictions seem to indicate, as they still do, that there'll be a second wave that will hit sometime in the fall. It could come as early as August. It could come as late as November. But the reality is that as people start coming back into classes, it would present us with a significant challenge. Unlike the residential campuses, we don't. Our students come and go. They live in the community, and a lot of them work in some of the frontline jobs. So I think that the risks were higher. It would be costly and prohibitively costly to do regular testing as students come and go. And the reality is that as I looked more and more at the decision, I wanted to ensure that we protected our students and our faculty, but also the community in which we serve. Our students are resilient, but they're also part of a community, and they are working in Worcester and the surrounding areas. So I didn't want to put them at risk and then have something that might start on campus spread to other work environments and affect broader communities. So it was just to me, the right choice, the smart choice, and getting it out in sufficient time for students to make an informed decisions and for us to prepare for it was clearly the smart decision to make. And I had the full support of my team and our board of trustees.
Just in before I turn it back to Grant, just you said you had the full support of the team. Feedback from students is as well, and from the professors and the associate professors, so the students and faculty. I mean, was anybody upset, or everybody understands the decision?
I think everybody understands the decision. There are always some people that feel more comfortable being in person. I've talked to a few students on and off, and they miss some of the socialization that happens in the face-to-face, but they also had concerns about the risk. So they were very grateful that we were taking their safety into consideration. The faculty, again, the majority of them so far has been very supportive. They felt that we made a brave choice by making the announcement and the decision early enough, but they were very supportive because they were concerned about their own safety. And the reality is that if most of them understand that even if we were to open and then a student is infected and is in a class, then that class will have to quarantine for 14 days and all the classes that the students had in. And then the repercussions of potential spread from that area would have been very difficult to manage and will impact the college to a point that we would have to revert to remote operations. It's easier to go from remote to more in person if it's allowed than the other way around, to go from an in-person teaching operation to remote. So what we're trying to do is do some in-person, limited to some labs with all the safety protocols, engage the students that need to be engaged, and have just the right number of people to support the student in their success, but to make sure that we're able to mitigate any of the risks that are involved. I believe a lot of the other community colleges are also taking similar measures.
In President Pedraja, you mentioned some of the differences between QCC and maybe a traditional four-year college. You don't have on-campus dorms. A lot of your students are closer by to campus. Your admissions process is a little bit different. Can you talk a little bit more about how those differences between QCC and another school and some of the others that we've seen come out with announcements that they would be taking holding classes online on campus? Sorry. How much did that factor into your decision making?
Well, when you think about the fact that we're a campus of basically commuter students, so they're going off to their home and to their jobs and to whatever social environments they are, and coming in. It's not like they're on campus and they stay on campus, and that all that we would have to worry is about them going out to a party on the weekends or maybe intermingling too much on campus. Those things can be controlled more in a residential campus, more so if you're a residential campus out in a remote setting, a small town. You can isolate students more readily. You can keep them in the dorms. Here, we have to keep them at home, and we have no control over that. They have jobs, and they might impact other areas. For the traditional colleges, the on-campus experience is part of their brand. For us, it is something that we hope to give them some on-campus experience, but there are working adults in many cases, or parents. So the type of issues that might affect the decision at a four-year college are different from what affects the decisions that our team will be looking at. We got to make sure that we keep them safe, not only for our campus, but for the community. And this was a better way than having them congregate. Classes would have to be reduced. Our classrooms are also older, smaller. We don't have large lecture halls. We have a smaller teacher-faculty ratio. So the reality is that we couldn't even space them in some cases if we wanted to. So it made more sense to do this kind of environment and just increase the support services that would enable them to engage.
Boy, we have just a moment or so left in this segment, and then we're going to be continuing our conversation coming up as well. But just to follow up on some of the things that you have said, I think we've got a pretty good handle on what went into the decision, and not an easy one, but to keep the fall semester online. I know that you certainly offer a lot of classes that are online. You have professors. I mean, that's really their specialty is the online learning. But you yourself, as an educator, is there a difference? Are you concerned at all about the quality of remote instruction versus in-classroom learning and some of those differences?
I am not as concerned about the quality. Our instructors are top-notch. They can teach in different modalities. And the reality that the difference between faculty members standing in front of class, asking questions, engaging students, and a faculty member being on a Zoom screen, asking questions, engaging students is very minimal. I think the elements are not on the quality of instruction per se, but on the students' ability to socialize, the informal connections that they make to other students or to the faculty member. The other piece is a hands-on component. Teaching has changed, so you could do labs. We have lab kits that we can send to students. There's a lot of simulations modules that they can use, but there are some labs and some things that require hands-on. Our nursing students do have clinical hours, so we're going to keep those components. But in the other areas, the experience is not that different, except that we have to create ways to engage the student. It can't just be the traditional lecture. It has to be more interactive. The materials that you put on an online web page have to draw the student in, have them work with it. You have to create chat rooms or discussion groups that will allow students to engage each other. So it's more of how do you recreate some of those informal elements that help in the learning process that are not necessarily the content piece. And we've worked hard at making sure that that's the case. People who are doing just online classes that don't have necessarily the Zoom piece to them take several weeks course to prepare them for that. So the teachers do. But for the other faculty, that's a challenge. The other part of the experience is that it's the equity issue. A lot of our students don't have laptops. They don't have internet connections. They don't have places that they can go away from their family to study or engage. And that's where a lot of students fail. The underrepresented minorities, the poor students, economically challenged, students that have some accessibility issues or disabilities. It is more difficult for them. So we're trying to figure out ways that we can mitigate that by providing hotspots to our students, providing laptops. We started doing that right away, and we'll continue doing it through the fall to ensure that they're engaged as well. And we're also providing follow-up calls, tutoring, advising services. Even our food pantry is open for drive-through once a week, so students can that depend on some food resources from the campus can have their needs met.
After we take a quick break, we'll talk more with President Pedraja about QCC's decision to keep the campus closed for the fall, as well as some of the social issues he's been outspoken about.
Business professionals trust the WBJ for the most relevant business news in Central Massachusetts. Our email newsletters include our daily report, as well as weekly focuses on manufacturing, healthcare, and the Metro West. Signing up is easy and free at wbjournal.com.
This is the weekly business report, found here at Worcester Business Journal and also heard on the Radio Worcester Network. We're talking with Quinsigamond Community College President Luis Pedraja, and very pleased to have you with us, Mr. President. Let me just ask quickly, we want to get into some of the social issues that are affecting everybody. When you made that announcement about you were going to have the online classes in the fall, I have to tell you, I just expected that the next day I would see, other colleges, other community colleges, other state colleges, everybody sort of following your lead, that was the way that it was going to be. Other colleges have made other decisions to have students come back maybe a little bit earlier in August to break it at Thanksgiving. Were you surprised for everything that you told us in these first 10 minutes together or so? Were you surprised that so many other colleges decided to open in the fall?
I'm not surprised. I expected that others might consider opening in the fall, particularly the ones that don't serve commuter students. If your brand is the campus experience, the socialization that happens, the dorms, and you're dependent on that, it's very difficult to just move to an online or remote experience. The reality is the price point differential is higher. A lot of students might say, why should I pay more if I'm not going to get the sports and the clubs and all the other interactions, the dorms, food services I normally get. The ones that serve commuter students might think a little bit in the middle of thinking, well, we still want to provide some in-person experience. But a lot of it, I think, is just that, to put it bluntly, a lot of them see it as their only option to remain viable. I think that you will see a few that will make a brave decision of saying, we're going to go mostly remote or to some level of a hybrid program, because you can't have all the students on campus at the same time, or you don't have enough dorm capacity, or they're worried about a surge. We've seen UMass Boston move in a remote direction, and UMass Amherst just made an announcement. I think they're going to have some students on campus, but most of the instruction is going to be predominantly remote, which is not that different from what we're doing.
And looking ahead for next spring already, jumping ahead, but would there be things that you're looking for in terms of course, the number of cases, maybe not just in Massachusetts but beyond, but also the number of positive test rates or how widely available testing is available? What would you be looking at most to see whether you have to?
I think what I'm looking at 3 factors. One of them is what you just said, the number of testing and cases. I mean, if it's very low community spread, I'm going to listen to the health expert. I'm not one, and I will follow suit. But I'm also going to maintain some precautions at that level, because there's some areas that you can't control. You can't control for human behavior. We've seen that in some of the states that open up. People think it's done and over, and I'm just going to go out and socialize like I did before, and then you get a surge. So we'll take that into consideration, but we also will take some precautions. what will really make a more significant decision is if there's a reliable treatment, something that is not just something that you get at the hospital, but something that would help treat and mitigate symptoms more quickly. And the ultimate criteria would be a vaccine that is widely available. Just because you develop one doesn't necessarily mean that everybody will have access to it right away. So once we have vaccination, then that might make the decision a lot easier. But we'll keep on monitoring, talk to health experts, and make an informed decision for the spring once the time comes, probably sometime in November.
I just want to make sure that we have enough time to talk about some of the things going on here in our community and across the nation. And just wanted to ask you about the fact you came out so quickly and so strongly against institutional racism following the death of George Floyd. And you made the statement in concert with Quinsigamond Community College's police chief. What were your thoughts and of what you were seeing in our community on TV across the nation and after the murder of George Floyd?
Well, it was a very difficult time for me. I'm a person with color. I've experienced discrimination. I've been stopped for just being in the wrong place. And I've been followed at stores. So it is, to me, something personal. But most significantly, it's I cannot stay quiet when I see an injustice. And the graphic video that we saw of this man being murdered so publicly, and the lack of action by others, particularly the lack of immediate repercussions in the city for the police officers, that really hit a chord with me. And I felt that my students can easily be subject to some of those systemic injustices, and I had to speak out. And I also had to put it in the context that we are in a nation that's divided, that there are a lot of structural, social injustices and institutionalized racism. And as an educational institution, we historically have been catalysts of change. We've also been barriers in some cases because we have education for some has been a privilege. But community colleges provide open access and have democratized education. And I think our role is to advocate for our students and to some degree bring forth those equity issues that affect our students and speak out against them.
Are there ongoing roles that QCC could play as well? Maybe once the semester starts back up, you're able to hold like a roundtable discussion, not in person, of course, but something like that you can kind of continue and hear from students, faculty, and others?
We've actually been doing that. Even before all this happened, we've been having something called Brave Space and Courageous Conversations, where students can come and talk about some issues of race and social justice and discrimination that they've experienced. We started a series for some of our staff and faculty administrators that's called Your Voice Matters, to hear some of the concerns and issues here internally that we've been talking about. And for over a year and a half, we've been doing trainings for our administrators and managers on issues like racial bias and discrimination and how to intercede when we see those issues. So that conversation has been going. I'm trying to get a little bit more beyond just a discussion and training. And I've been, I told the faculty and staff I'm going to start announce on Tuesday a equity initiative at QCC, and we're going to look at several issues, including doing an equity audit for the campus and to look at hiring practices, work with faculty and staff, and looking at what are the barriers and institutional challenges that people of color and others, including those that are economically disadvantaged, face at QCC, to make some changes and provide more training for faculty in pedagogical issues and other areas that can help us be leaders in equity, as well as open up to the community and provide some other trainings and roundtables at the community and speak to rectify some of the social inequalities that we've seen.
I'm afraid that's really where we're going to have to leave it for today. What a great conversation. So much more that we could get into, but we'll have to leave that for another time on the podcast. And Dr. Luis Pedraja, thank you so much for being with us. Greatly appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it. Look forward to having other discussions.
Absolutely. And for the weekly business report, I'm Hank Stoltz along with Grant Welker, and we will indeed do it again next week. Make sure that you find the Worcester Business Journal podcast wherever you get your podcast, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, CastBox, Podcast Addict, and Himalaya. In other words, it is everywhere. The easiest place for you to download it is at WBJournal.com.